Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming along to this press conference. We are here today following a very recent visit to Kurdistan, and what we intend to highlight today is what we saw firsthand when we were there. In particular, that we repeatedly asked and continue to ask that the Turkish authorities comply with their international obligations. They are a member of the European Council. That means that they should not be holding prisoners in isolation like they've been doing with Öcalan. It means that prisoners should be having access to their family, something else that has been denied to Öcalan. And we have a very simple plea to the Turkish authorities. The key to unlocking a lasting peace settlement between its Kurdish minority and the rest of Turkey is freeing Öcalan so that peace talks can be resumed. Without Öcalan being freed, there can be no lasting peace. Clearly, nobody wants this conflict to continue. The leadership of the Kurdish people and its leader, Öcalan, have been very clear that they want to enter into talks, into negotiations, to ensure that a lasting settlement is put in place. It's now time for Erdogan to do a number of things. The first one is to comply by Turkey's international obligations. And that means ending the isolation of Öcalan. And the second, and equally as importantly, is to restart those peace talks and to ensure that a lasting settlement is put in place so that Öcalan is also released and a lasting peace can be secured. I was one of the members of that delegation. I've got 3 colleagues alongside me who visited Kurdistan, and what we intend to do is to give each of them maybe 5 minutes to outline what they saw, and then we will open it up for all of you to ask questions. Sorry, I didn't say who I was at the start, but I'll let you know now. My name is Manuel Cortés, and I'm the General Secretary of the TSSA, the union that is hosting this press conference today. So I think I'll start off with a lawyer. I'll start off with Paul Scully from Moorish Solicitors. He's a very experienced labour lawyer and was an integral part of our delegation. So over to you, Paul.
Thanks very much, Manuel. It's only 2 weeks since we returned from Kurdistan. I think all of the members of the delegation found that it was a life-changing experience. We visited Istanbul, Ankara, and Diyarbakir, where we were able to meet politicians, trade unionists, campaigners, lawyers, doctors, and most movingly, Leyla Güven, the hunger striker, who today will be, I think, on her 114th day on hunger strike. There are 313 prisoners throughout Turkey and Europe now who remain on hunger strike, seeking a lifting of the isolation that's been imposed on Öcalan for 20 years. The 20th anniversary of that isolation fell on the Friday of our delegation to Kurdistan. The leader of our delegation had requested from the Minister of Justice in Turkey a meeting with Öcalan on Imrali Island. Sadly, our written request did not receive any reply. Those we did meet were uplifted by the fact that international solidarity exists there. They do feel, and it seems to me personally, that this is an issue that has been under the radar, in particular of the mainstream media, for too long. over 30 million Kurds exist in a stateless position. A war has continued for many years, and without movement in relation to Öcalan's position, it seems to me that a lasting peace is a very long way away. The request the delegation made was not for anything as radical as immediate release. The request the delegation made was simple, that international law and Turkey's own laws require that solitary confinement should be exercised sensibly, with access to lawyers, access to family. Those things have not been allowed in the case of lawyers for some 8 years, and in the case of family, 1 visit has been allowed in about 3 years. These requests are not difficult to comply with. The lawyers we met in Kurdistan said Turkey's laws are fine, but unless the state and the judiciary are prepared to make those laws apply, they won't use of those laws at all. Thanks very much.
Our next speaker will be British actor Maxine Peake.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, to add to what Paul's just said, I mean, this was all very sort of new to me. Was probably one of the least informed of the delegation when I went out there. And what really struck me was how the women were at the forefront of the protest. Obviously meeting Layla was it was an inspiring but also a harrowing experience to see a woman, you know, so very fragile and so very weak and in so much pain, but then so full of spirit and life and determination. And also meeting the peace mothers. Again, I mean, it was a very moving experience to see a group of women, mainly 60 plus. We met one amazing woman who was in her 80s, who was facing 15 years imprisonment for protecting her son's grave. But again, as I adding to what Paul's just said, it was just the shock that how this has been ignored on a global scale, on a European scale. I couldn't comprehend that this, and coming back from Turkey and people saying, oh, what were you doing over there? And people had no knowledge whatsoever of the plight of the Kurdish people over there. And the shock that a member of parliament could be on hunger strike and it's not headline international news. So yeah, for me it was a fact-finding mission, a real eye-opener. And yeah, as to what Paul and what Manuel said, it's about, you know, in our little way, you sort of feel slightly inadequate as a group of sort of Westerners going on and going, you know, but the appreciation for us being there was really overwhelming and humbling. And we just hope that, you know, we can spread that message, we can get, you know, like I said, we don't want major things, we just want, you know, Öcalan to have visitors' rights. You know, that seems pretty horrendous that we're even asking for that. So, yeah.
Thank you, Maxine. The next speaker is Tony Burke from our sister union, Unite.
Well, thanks very much, Manuel. I want to just touch on besides the points that Maxime and Manuel and Paul have touched on about the plight of Öcalan, and I find it absolutely astonishing that in this day and age, somebody who is forced into prison can be treated in such a manner that he's isolated and not even had access to his own lawyers since 2011. Has only met his brother. His last visit of anybody was in 2000, earlier on this year. It's absolutely astonishing, and this sort of treatment from a country that classes itself as being part of a civilized society, quite frankly, is astonishing. I want to say a number of things as well about the hunger strikes. It's not just Layla who is the most prominent. There's about 300 people on hunger strike in Turkey at the moment, protesting about the isolation. And I think they're very, very brave people indeed. One of the other things that came through to me was the repression of independent trade unions in Turkey. No question about that. We have good relationships with a number of unions in Turkey, in the federations. Manuel was also able to talk to some train workers unions as well, which is Fantastic. But if you look at what's happened in recent times, you've had 3 major incidents in Turkey that prove that the state now is colluding to break the trade union movement, independent trade union movement. There has been the arrest and imprisonment, but subsequent release of shop stewards at the Renault factory, which was again absolutely astonishing. You've had the murder and assassination of the president of the Rubber Workers Union on his way to represent his members at a company. And then of course now this horrendous situation that's coming to light at the new airport in Istanbul, where there has been a number of accidents, and in order for the government to make sure that there's no publicity given to them, there's even doing things like ambulances who've been called to the site, told not to turn on their lights or their sirens, because they just don't want any publicity. They reckon that there have been a number of fatalities, lots of injuries, and again that's been, if you like, covered up by the government. And finally, one of the things I found absolutely astonishing, but not surprising, is the government are supporting yellow unionism for its own ends, and in particular in the public services. And a number of unions told us, and lawyers, that individuals who want to apply for a job in the public sector, if your parents or relatives are members of an independent trade union, then you don't get the job. I mean, that sort of thing is absolutely reprehensible. Where we've got to think about is what we do in the future. And you know, Simon's here from the campaign Freedom for Öcalan. We've got 14 unions now signed up, and I think our job after visiting the other week is, when we get the report done, to have something that we can give to delegates at conferences such as the TUC and the Labour Party, and to raise the profile of this. This is about Öcalan, who is in fact, in our view, a political prisoner and the Mandela of the Middle East, and it's time that we got the mainstream press and the mainstream media to understand how serious this is. From Unite's point of view, we'll be giving every publicity we can. We did interviews yesterday with our own communications team. We'll be publicising the campaign in our union magazine and also on other blogs and websites to raise the profile. And I think it's really important that the unions in the UK really understand what's happening and get behind the campaign. And it's great to have somebody like Maxine on board as well, who can, obviously, when you're in the media and in that situation, I'm sure that it will assist in getting some publicity for the campaign. Thanks.
Thank you, Tony. I just want to make some closing remarks from this part of the press conference, and then we'll open it up for questions, because I think it's really important that I do emphasize what happened after I left Turkey. I actually went over to Strasbourg for a demonstration. That demonstration was attended by over 40,000 people. That's a really big number of people to turn up to a demonstration. And there was one very simple demand at that demonstration, and that was to end the isolation of Öcalan. And I said from the platform, when I addressed that massive crowd, that if any of the hunger strikers did die, that their blood will be on Erdogan's hands and that of his terrible regime. Because the demands that are being made by those people on hunger strike are really easy to resolve. All that Erdogan has to do is comply with Turkey's own laws.
Yeah.
Never mind the international obligations that Turkey has signed up to. This is not rocket science. This is something that can be resolved, and resolved very easily. So my plea again today, because I know there's a few here from the media, is that you get this message out, that this is a situation that can be resolved incredibly easily. All the Turkish authorities have to do is to implement their own laws. And if they do that, that will end the isolation of Öcalan. Clearly, over and above that, what we want then to happen is for the Turkish state to restart its peace talks with Öcalan, because, as Paul rightly said at the start, if that doesn't happen, peace will be a long time in coming. And everybody wants an end to this conflict. And we want a long-lasting, peaceful resolution to be put in place. And the other thing I did want, Öcalan, and I'll finish, I did want from that platform about Öcalan and the struggle of the Kurdish people, that if any of the hunger strikers that does die, and I hope it doesn't happen because the Turkish state can stop this any minute it wants, but if they do die, I did warn Erdogan and the rest of his cronies that we will never forgive and we will never forget. So over to yourselves if you've got any questions.
Matt Nathan from the Freedom for Öcalan campaign. We've heard about what we want the Turkish state to do. For trade unionists and Labour members and activists watching this and hearing these words, what's your ask of them? What do you want them to do?
I'll start and then you can follow.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, for us in our union, we, like Tony has done in his, we've publicised this very widely. What we want now is our branches to pass resolutions, our branches to affiliate to the Freedom for Öcalan campaign. But I think the key here, as Maxine pointed out, is that not enough is known about this within our country, and I presume within many other countries. So part of our role is to inform people of what's going on. We can do that with our own membership, but hopefully that will start some kind of trend that can make known across the world what the issues at stake are. Because I think if most people, most civilized people would think that make it a demand that is as simple as the Turkish government comply with its own laws, is not asking for the world. It's asking for something that they should be doing anyway. Sorry.
What I think we need to be doing with our own members in trade unions, and this is very, very important, is to highlight what is actually going on in the country, but also to explain to those colleagues in our unions, if this was happening in the UK, people would be absolutely up in arms if people were being arrested, stopped from job. I mean, we do get anti-union activity, but when you get the leader of a union assassinated on his way to represent members, then I think we've got to sort of make sure that our ordinary members, and activists in particular, shop stewards and reps, understand what's going on. I think there's two things we can do. One is, I think there's got to be a further delegation, if possible, an international delegation, consisting of lay members, shop stewards and reps, if possible, from some of the key TUC unions, or even including some of our unions in the European Union and elsewhere. Don't forget, the European Union can do a lot more than it currently is, and this is one of the things, again, we'll be raising to our European bodies such as Industrial and Uni. And I also think that it's not unreasonable to ask our members who are shop stewards and reps to raise this at their constituency Labour parties, because a lot of our members are involved in their constituency Labour parties and trades councils as well. Okay. And I think we can do that. We need to build up, like we did before with other campaigns, to where we get a critical mass of support, and then we can do the things like the TUC and the Labour Party conference, where we can get a much bigger audience and get much wider coverage. But in getting lay members on the shop floor, lay delegates to bodies, our executive committees involved, I think that will certainly begin to build things up, Matt.
Any questions? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Penny Papadopoulou from the Greek newspaper Eleftheria. I have two questions. One is, do you think that the government's reluctance to yield to the hunger strikers' demands is because it's pursuing a nationalist agenda before the local elections? And the second one is, if you were to be granted a visit to Imrali prison, what message would you have liked to convey to Abdullah Öcalan?
You want to start with that? The second one, start
The
with
second with the message.
Yes.
Well, you want the message out there that he has. You want to say that they, not just the European community, but the global community are behind him, and that's, what we're hopefully now we're working towards. But that his story's getting out there, and you look, it's interesting when talking, the comparison with, which has been made before, with Mandela. How do we make this? How do we make Öcalan's story and journey and plight as important and as all-encompassing as Mandela. I mean, we called him a terrorist, people ignored him for many years, and it's about, it's tapping into how do we awaken people's awareness. But I think I would want him to know that, you know, people are there, no one's forgotten, and that, you know, hopefully strides are being made throughout, you know, the global community to get him free, and yeah.
Paul?
So, to take your first question, we met with the HDP
Yeah.
whilst we were in Turkey. Their view is quite clear, that not only Erdogan's party but the main opposition party together are both riding on a nationalist wave into these elections. And it's only the HDP that's taking a different view. So there's not even the official opposition standing up to take a non-nationalist view that might otherwise help the position of the Kurds. So yes, I think certainly that's what's happening.
Any other questions?
Yes.
My name is Estella. I work for the Freedom of Öcalan campaign, Peace in Kurdistan campaign.
Okay.
I'm just curious in terms of the legal issues and the law in Turkey. I mean, we had serious reports, you know, from the lawyers involved in the campaign for years, you know, that even now in the latest developments, there are now laws implemented, well, really against the previous laws. So meaning to say, the challenge in terms of just sticking to the law, you know, is very difficult. So I cannot see without mobilization in terms of challenging even the latest developments on the legal front, you know, how this is going to be possible. Meaning to say that the role of the lawyers, you know, in the whole process, I think might be an issue to maybe raise also with lawyers abroad, and maybe have a massive kind of campaign from the legal point of view. Like, you know, I know that lawyers were activated in the famous Guantanamo, you know, where international lawyers groups were writing en masse, you know, to the government and saying, we want to have access to Guantanamo. So I would have thought maybe there is some ways and means to mobilize around other sections, you know, like lawyers, you know, in a way that challenges also the legal front in Turkey and the present kind of deterioration of the laws.
Yes, I agree.
Meaning, you know, a direct access, you have, you know, a legal challenge, you know, that lawyers around the world demand access from the Turkish Justice Minister to the to Öcalan, for example.
Yeah, telling the story everywhere is important, but I agree that the legal, without the rule of law, where do any of us stand? And it's the ridiculous position has become now this in relation to access to Imrali Island, that whereas a year or two ago we were told this by the lawyers that the position would have been, we can't make facilities available because of some legal hurdle. Now there's no pretense about that. They make up stories about the boat is broken.
Yeah.
So we can't
The
get
sea was
across
too
the
rough.
water. They say that
The weather wasn't good.
if the boat's not broken, the weather's not good, and looking out the window, the sun is shining and it's not windy. But most recently, and most worryingly, they don't even now bother with those stories.
Yeah.
What they do now is simply ignore the requests
Yeah.
for access, and with that kind of disregard for the rule of law, then the whole framework of the system is in jeopardy. I agree with you, and how much I can do personally, I don't know, but I'm prepared to try and to extend this to other lawyers, because the one thing we all have in common here in the UK, for all that we've got our own faults in the system, is that the rule of law essentially still stands here.
I mean, just to add to what Paul has said, and it's a wider comment, it's very clear to me that Erdogan used the excuse of a failed coup to do a coup of his own. He has jailed all the journalists that were against his regime and were critical of what he was doing. He has jailed judges that would probably try to abide by the laws of Turkey. He has jailed trade unionists, he has jailed lawyers, he has jailed anybody who has stood in his way in terms of trying to hold to account the government of Turkey to its own laws and the rights of its people. And the situation is critical. Clearly, you know, there was already repression against the Kurdish people before this happened, so that has just intensified. But there is now widespread repression against anybody who takes up their heads and says, I don't agree with Erdogan. I met people from our sister trade union, who were telling me they are being harassed. Ordinary rank and file representatives of a trade union are being harassed now by the Turkish authorities. So the situation in Turkey is very critical in terms of it being any kind of functioning democracy, to be brutally honest. And of course, that is amplified far worse when it comes to the treatment of the Turkish state to its Kurdish minority.
Marcus Barnett, Holland Star. I was very interested to hear what you said about the trade union movement. I was wondering, like, to hear more about it maybe, and I wonder how restless you think the situation is on the ground. You know, whether people think that the unions are on the offensive over this, or whether they're very much getting repressed on the defensive. And also in a non-Morning Star capacity, I'm also the international officer for Young Labour, and through the PES we're aligned to the HDP.
Yeah.
And we've tried to get in touch for a good long while with several comrades who are in jail.
Yeah.
But every time their families get in touch with us and tell us to write, because we're interested in doing a sort of like Red Aid letter campaign,
Yeah.
you know, to comrades inside of there.
Yeah.
They seem to just be able to stop being able to talk to us from inside the jails. So I just wondered if you've any ideas or suggestions on how best to humiliate these people who are running around jails.
Well, can I go to the first point about trade unions? The situation, I think, Simon, how many federations are there in? Four. And some of them across the political spectrum as well. And that's the problem. There are some who are very, very supportive, and others who understand what the situation is, but are very reluctant to raise these issues. We're going to continue, the way we're working is through the UK Trade Union Campaign. TUC, GFTU are on board, as well as and other federations. We will work as well through our global federations. Our relationship, of course, with the American unions is very, very important to us, and that's something that we'll want to talk to those colleagues about. So we've got to keep pushing the whole issue, and where we get an opportunity to talk to our friends and comrades in the Turkish trade union movement, we will do our very best to get the message over. There's no question, the yellow unionism that's being created by the government, and this is what happened in Mexico as well, as you know, state-sponsored trade unions where they deliberately kept wages and conditions low, saying that's the case in Turkey. But when you get that sort of situation, it's sometimes difficult for us, because these folks, or these unions, tend to try to affiliate to the big global federations, and we'll always be there to say, no, we can't have these people on board. In terms of your relationships through Labour with the political party there that we're supportive of, and then all of a sudden it just stops. I think we've got to keep trying. I think we've got to use social media as well, and it would be good if Young Labour, and I know you're here in your capacity as a reporter from the Star, but in the case of Young Labour, it'd be really good if we can get this issue raised in the constituencies and in you know, conferences and things of that nature. And we're always happy if we get an invite to come and speak about this. We're always happy to come and talk about these issues. Keep it nice and tight, but make sure that this campaign is visible. One of the things that's interesting, the new logo that's been produced with Ursula's face on it, is very, very good, very, very striking. And we've been using it on social media. And it's interesting because one of our team yesterday said to us that almost certainly this will be branded as a terrorist, a picture of a terrorist, and they'll do all they can to stop an image, a striking image, gaining traction. So what we can probably do in the union movement is, when we do things like the fringe meetings at the main conferences, is maybe we get badges so people can wear them, because people say, what's that about? And immediately it begins to click with folks if they've got a link. But if you want us to do anything through Labour and anything through your organisation, we'll just give us a shout. We're happy to do it. I'm sure our colleagues would be willing to do that as well.
I mean, just to add to that, one incident that sticks in my mind that just shows you the level of repression that there is against trade unionists within Turkey itself. And Tony touched on this at the start. It's the new airport that they were constructing. Erdogan wanted it concluded before the local elections that are going to be happening quite soon. Yeah. As a result of that, they put so much pressure on the workers that 50 odd fatalities happened in the space of 8 months. The trade union leaders had the temerity to come out and demonstrate against what was happening, the breaches of health and safety, people dying. You know what happened? They were jailed. They were jailed without trial. Eventually they were dismissed, but they spent several months in jail, even though they were never properly charged. And that tells you the level of repression that there is currently in Turkey against anybody who dares say something against Erdogan and his terrible regime. Yeah. We've just been joined by Connor, who was, I think he had difficulty finding this place, but he's finally made it. So I'm going to pass over to him in case he wants to say a few words. He was part of our delegation too. He was very helpful because he kept it all together. He coordinated a lot of it and did all the work behind the scenes as well. So Connor, there's something you want to say?
I'm very sorry for my belated presence. And so I can't exactly comment on what was said already by the other delegates. The one thing that I want to stress, though, the most is the role that Öcalan plays at the center of everything that's taking place right now. Because he is, as the leader of the Kurdish freedom movement and the broader freedom movement in general, the democratization movement in general in Turkey and the Middle East, the imprisonment of Öcalan represents the imprisonment both of an identity and of notions of democracy and freedom in that region. And I think that that is very clearly demonstrated by the manner in which the Turkish state's treatment of Öcalan in prison reflects their treatment of both the Kurdish population in Turkey and the opposition in general across the country and across the region, including northern Syria. When there was a series of peace talks between 2013, 2015, talks to begin peace negotiations. These talks were premised upon a roadmap to peace that Öcalan had outlined in terms of, he specified a plan for the state to both democratize itself and delegate autonomy to different peoples and groups within the state framework to realize both a democratic nation state and freedom for different peoples, freedom of expression within the country. And the talks that were modeled off of that program, during that time, everyone that we spoke to while we were on the delegation said that there was an atmosphere of peace, democracy, and freedom of expression in Turkey at that time. And after the talks broke down, the talks break down right after the June 2015 elections, which is when Erdogan loses a parliamentary majority. Erdogan's AKP government loses a parliamentary majority, and HDP wins an unprecedented 13%. After that, talks break down. There's crackdown on civil society organizations, crackdown on HDP, imprisonment of MPs, and the imposition of the aggravated isolation against Öcalan, and no one has visited him since. The Turkish state fears Öcalan because of his ideas and because of the power he holds to bring peace to the region. They spent 15 years calling him a terrorist, and then sent government officials to meet with him in Imralı prison. They understand the power that he has. They understand that he is the one who has the power to say to the armed struggle there to lay down their arms. If there's the Turkish state tried to get Öcalan to declare an end to the armed struggle, and he would only do so on the basis of certain guarantees from the Turkish state to move forward with the negotiations that they were not willing to make. So he refused. The Turkish state knows the power that he has, and they fear that power, so they try to isolate him. And everyone that we spoke to says that the isolation of Öcalan represents the broader isolation strategy that the Kurdish, that Turkish security policy takes against the broader Kurdish population. They impose curfews on cities. There is an embargo on all opposition in the media. They isolate the issue and pretend like it doesn't exist. And they hope that if they can isolate it sufficiently, then it will go away. And I think with Öcalan's resiliency and the resiliency of the movement in Turkey and in Kurdistan in general shows that will not be possible, that is not how that struggle will end. And I think that the Turkish state, that there's this broader underlying issue of the Kurdish question that underlies a lot of the issues that take place across Turkey and Syria as a backdrop for where all of these different security policies and ups and downs come from. But Öcalan has written something that represents a solution to the Kurdish question. And I was told by someone quite recently that the issue now is not that there is a Kurdish question, but a Turkish question. And the issue is how the state will address that question of its own nature going forward.
Yeah, well, it's not a question really, it's just a comment, just in terms of the Freedom for Öcalan campaign that I co-chair with Christine. I just want to put on record thanks to all of you for actually going. It takes a bit of courage to go there at the moment in the current circumstances, and to have such well-known and senior people going is a real important milestone again. I think you joined us on the platform last year at Labour Party, Manuel, and obviously I hope this year will be even bigger and we can carry on building it. And Maxine as well, you're obviously very well known in the fact that you've been there. The same with Tony and Paul and Connor. I think it's a tremendous thing that you've gone there and done it. And it just helps break the taboo. And that's a really important thing, because as you've just said, Connor, they've got a person in prison, they're trying to imprison an idea and a movement. And the great thing that we've got historically in the union movement is we know how to build solidarity campaigns, and we've really made a difference for people in South Africa, for people in Colombia. We're working on Palestine as well. And I think it is absolutely not an exaggeration to say that Öcalan is the Mandela of this period, and I think it is absolutely critical, as you were saying, Maxine, that we get this story out wider and more people understanding it and engaging in it properly, because that region, what happens in Turkey, the Middle East, is absolutely crucial to global politics as well. And these people share our values. They, in terms of equality, inclusiveness, tolerance, women's rights, they are the values of the labour movement, trade union movement, progressive movement, and we absolutely must build and strengthen and deepen our solidarity with that cause. So well done for having the courage to go there and do it and raise the issues.
Any more comments?
No, sorry, the press officer asking questions, but in the press release that we all contributed to, we talked about key findings, and you've touched on a number of things today. Is there one key finding from the delegation that you want to push out, that you kind of come away with?
Well, I think we'll start with Paul. Everybody can give one. So we'll end up with 5 then. Paul?
It's on a tangent really, but as a trade union lawyer, I'm going to say something like the union position that Tony and Manuel have touched on. Manuel spoke to the rail sister unions in Istanbul, and they described how they're described by the state now as godless communists, and how the state have conflated the idea of trade unionism and terrorism. So people are afraid to join unions because they'll be accused of being terrorists. And that relates entirely to everything else that's going on there. And that's a point I want specifically to make, because I think it's a frightening position.
Tony?
I think it's got to be that to the trade union movement there, certainly that they're not on their own. and to Öcalan himself that he's not on his own, he's not forgotten about. You know, 70 years of age in isolation on an island in the Bosphorus, that's barbaric.
Maxine?
I mean, for me, I think the point is that it's the women at the forefront of the struggle for me that really, that's, I think, it's really encouraging and really inspiring, and I think it's something that we can, in Britain, we can learn, and through the world we can learn a lot from, that these women seem to be at the forefront and are making huge sacrifices.
Yeah.
Connor?
There's a little bit of a twofold one, I suppose. The resiliency of the movement is astounding, but also this is nothing new. I think that this movement is it's 40 years under its belt at this point, if not more. But the key founding that I took away from this delegation was the extent to which the rule of law has been undermined in Turkey. That there is a complete coalescence of all judicial and a lot of times even local legislative branches with the central government, with Erdogan and the AKP government. And there's no area outside of this branching blanket of security policy that is allowed to say that anything with a suspicion of affiliation to so-called terrorist activity is totally exiled from society.
Suppose I'll get the last comment. Yeah. And it'll be a cheerful one. We're going to win. Öcalan will be released, and Kurdish people will have justice. Oh, no, one more question.
Hi, my name's Elif. I'm here from the Kurdish People's Assembly, and I just wanted to put it on the records our deep appreciation and thanks for you going out there on this delegation. It's not an easy thing to do to go to Turkey at the moment, so it's definitely deeply appreciated, and it really, and I'm sure you guys know this, it really will play a role in history, that, you know, your solidarity and your presence, whether it was going to İmralı or you know, going to other parts of southeast Turkey, to northern Kurdistan, it's really appreciated because, you know, as I think some people, you know, most comrades here have understood, but Öcalan represents to us, especially as Kurdish women, but as 40 million Kurdish people, he represents the person who created our resurrection of a people, of a nation, and as an existence. And so it's not just him as an individual is incredibly important to us, but also his ideas is what gives us the will to continue to fight. And, you know, when there's the rise of the far right globally right now, which, you know, I'm sure comrades will know that Erdogan's Turkey is not disconnected from Trump's America, from Bolsonaro's Brazil, and, you know, so on. And when there is this global, you know, direction, Öcalan's ideas really gives us the will to live, because it shows us that capitalism and nationalism that is essentially an empire of fear will not make us give up, and fear will never work with us, it will be love. And, you know, hundreds of people, and now from today onwards, thousands of political prisoners in Turkey will be on hunger strike because they love Öcalan, because they know that he means freedom, peace, and democracy, not just for Turkey, not just for the Kurdish people, but, you know, definitely for the entire region, but potentially even the world if he's really understood. And I think it will be a big shame, you know, many revolutionary thinkers were not understood in their time, and it will be a big shame that, you know, during this, you know, with the existence of something like Rojava, the women's revolution, women and the fight against fascism in Syria as well, it will be a historical shame if we don't try to understand Öcalan in our time and instrumentalize his ideas, his methods to be able to fight towards a democratic world today, before we lose our world, because it's not just, you know, rise of fascism, but, you know, the climate where, you know, our world is essentially burning. So in every way, it's essentially a life or death matter that, you know, we really need to continue to fight. And yes, Manuel, you're right, we will win. Thank you.
Right. Look, can I thank everybody for coming to this press conference? and hopefully we'll see Öcalan free very soon.